This case study is all about John Dillinger, who is an infamous gangster from the 20s and 30s of American history. He is like a very famous bank robber. He's got movies about him. If you've ever seen the movie Public Enemies, Johnny Depp plays John Dillinger. I think it also has Christian Bale in it, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's Christian Bale, but I don't know. But anyways, let's start talking about John Dillinger through the scope of fingerprints and why I think this is such an interesting little case study. To start, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the gangster era. American gangsters first took root during the 1920s Prohibition era when they were tremendously successful in keeping quote-unquote thirsty Americans satisfied. Their pockets filled from the success of their underground operations and organized crime became a speeding train by the time Prohibition was repealed. It was too late to slow it, and the train was moving full speed ahead. Criminal legends and masterminds were a dime a dozen during this time, with the likes of Bonnie and Clyde, Babyface Nelson, Bugsy Siegel, and Al Capone splashing across newspaper headlines. One of the most infamous criminals emerging from the 20s and 30s was bank robber John Dillinger. Infamy. After spending time in prison for robbing a grocery store and hurting someone in the process, Dillinger and his gang, creatively known as the Dillinger Gang, robbed 24 banks between 1933 and 34. Eventually, members of the gang were caught and sent to prison. Dillinger managed to escape, formed a new gang called the New Dillinger Gang, and began robbing banks again. These actions led to several shootouts, and multiple police and civilians died. Dillinger and his gang busted out other gang members out of prison and, in a bold move, even robbed a police station. The string of robberies, getaways, and shootouts, coupled with Dillinger's charismatic personality, brought him to celebrity status. Car companies even boasted in advertisements that he used their brand as a getaway car. By this time, the FBI was tracking Dillinger and in 1934 named him Public Enemy Number 1. And included a $10,000 reward on his head. Dillinger was finding it increasingly difficult to lead a somewhat normal life and felt the pressure of being the most wanted criminal in the U.S. He felt he needed to do something. Changing his identity. In the summer of 1934, Dillinger, who went by the alias Jimmy Lawrence, sought out a famous mob doctor and had rudimentary plastic surgery in an attempt to alter his appearance. This surgery cost him $5,000, which, remember, this is in the 1930s. That's a lot of money. After the first round of facial surgery, he went back to the doctor and asked that his fingerprints be removed. In a painful process, the outer layer of the skin was cut away. After, chemical washes consisting of acid were applied to the fingertips. During this time, criminals often tried to remove their prints, but were seldom successful. One of the issues encountered was that attempts to cut out fingerprints often led to the tips of the fingers being scarred, and this scarring pattern is itself a print. Often the new scar is even more unique and recognizable than the typical ridge patterns that were present. The entire country was wrapped with the story of Dillinger and his escapades. Some even regarded him as a Robin Hood of the Great Depression, although there are no records of sharing his money with the poor. Eventually, the bounty of Dillinger rose to $25,000, and an associate of his, often referred to as the Lady in Red, contacted police with information of his whereabouts. On July 22, 1934, Dillinger was leaving the Biograph Theater in Chicago, Illinois, when FBI agents confronted him and shot him multiple times as he reached for a pistol. Legend has it that bystanders raced over to the deceased Dillinger and dipped handkerchiefs and newspaper in the pooling blood to create memorabilia. During the autopsy, prints were taken. While the fingerprint pattern had clearly been altered, enough of the ridge patterns remained on the outer edges of the print to positively identify the body as that of John Dillinger. The body was put on display, and the public was invited to file past to view one of the most famous criminals of all time. Fearing grave robbers and fanatics, the family had the body buried under 3 feet of concrete.